In November 1918, a military hospital in northern France treated hundreds of wounded soldiers. The war was ending. Men were dying. And Nurse Sarah Mitchell worked the night shift in Ward 7. For 3 weeks, everything was normal. Then, soldiers started waking up in the middle of the night, all at the same time, whispering the same names. Names of men who had died days before. Before she passed in 1967, Sarah told her daughter what happened in that ward, what she heard, what she couldn't explain. This is that story. November 1918, northern France. The war was ending, but the casualties kept coming. Military Hospital number 47 sat 5 miles behind the front lines, close enough to hear distant artillery, far enough to feel safe. Sarah Mitchell was 24 years old. She'd been a nurse for 2 years. She'd seen terrible things: shattered limbs, gas burns, men dying slowly in agony. But she'd learned to manage, to stay professional, to do her job. She worked the night shift in Ward 7, the overnight shift, midnight to 8 a.m., 12 beds, usually 8 to 10 patients at any given time. Soldiers recovering from surgery, soldiers waiting to go home, soldiers dying. Ward 7 was on the 2nd floor of the East Wing, a long rectangular room with 6 beds on each side, tall windows at one end, a single door at the other. One nurse's station in the middle. Sarah's shift always started the same way. She'd arrive at 23:45 hours, 11:45 p.m., get report from the evening nurse, check supplies, then begin her rounds at midnight. The hospital was always quiet at night. The day shift was chaos. Doctors making rounds, surgeries, visitors, ambulances arriving with new casualties. But night shift was different. Peaceful almost. Just Sarah, her patients, and the sound of men breathing in the dark. Most patients slept through the night. Some woke in pain and needed morphine. Some had nightmares and needed comfort. Some died quietly, and Sarah would call the morgue attendant. It was difficult work, emotionally draining. But Sarah was good at it. She cared about her patients, learned their names, held their hands when they were scared, wrote letters to their families when they couldn't. November 12, 1918. Sarah's shift started like any other. She received report from Nurse Thompson. 8 patients in the ward, 4 post-surgical, 3 recovering from infections, 1 critical. Probably wouldn't make it through the night. Bed 3 is the critical one, Thompson said. Private Anderson, gas burns, lungs are failing. He's on morphine. Keep him comfortable. Sarah nodded. She'd seen gas cases before. There wasn't much you could do except manage pain. Thompson left. Sarah was alone with 8 sleeping soldiers. She did her first round, checked each patient, made sure they were breathing, made sure their wounds were clean, made sure they were comfortable. Everything was normal, completely normal. Private Anderson in bed 3 was unconscious. His breathing was labored, wet, rattling sounds. Sarah knew he'd be dead by morning. She adjusted his pillow, made sure he wasn't in pain. She returned to her desk, started her charting. The ward was silent except for breathing and the occasional cough. Then, at 01:30 hours, 1:30 a.m., something changed. It started with the curtain on the far window. It moved, just slightly, like a breeze had caught it. Sarah looked up. The windows were closed. They were always closed. November in northern France was cold, but the curtain moved again. A slow, deliberate movement. Sarah stood up, walked to the window, checked the latch. It was secure, locked. The window hadn't been opened. She touched the curtain. It was still. No breeze, no movement. She shook her head. Probably just air circulation from the heating vents. She returned to her desk. 5 minutes later, she heard it. A whisper. Quiet, barely audible. coming from the far end of the ward. Sarah looked up. All 8 patients appeared to be sleeping. Nobody moving, nobody talking. But she'd heard something. She was certain. She walked down the center aisle between the beds, listening, watching. Nothing, just sleeping men. Then she heard it again, clearer this time. A single word, whispered. Sarah. She froze. Someone had said her name, but who? She looked at each bed. All the patients were still. Eyes closed, breathing steady. Hello? She whispered. Does someone need something? No response, just silence. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous, just off. Like the atmosphere in the ward had changed somehow. She checked each patient again. Everyone was sleeping, even Private Anderson, though his breathing was worse now, more labored. He probably had an hour left, maybe less. Sarah returned to her desk, tried to focus on her charting, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She looked up at the beds. In the dim light, she could see the shapes of sleeping men. Everything looked normal, but it didn't feel normal. Private Anderson died at 03:47 hours, 3:47 a.m. Sarah was at his bedside when it happened. She'd noticed his breathing had changed, become irregular. The death rattle. She knew he had minutes left. She held his hand. Even though he was unconscious, even though he probably couldn't feel it, it seemed like the right thing to do. His breathing slowed, then stopped. Sarah waited 30 seconds, checked for a pulse. Nothing. She recorded the time of death in her notes. She pulled the sheet over his face, then went to call the morgue attendant. Standard procedure. They'd come collect the body before the morning shift arrived. While she was on the phone, she heard something behind her. Movement in the ward. She turned around. Bed 8, the bed furthest from her desk. The curtain was moving. Not the window curtain, the privacy curtain around the bed. It was swaying slowly, like someone had just walked past it. Sarah hung up the phone, walked toward bed 8. Private Cooper, she called out. That was the patient in bed 8. A young soldier, maybe 20 years old, recovering from a leg wound. Are you awake? Do you need something? No response. She pulled back the curtain. Private Cooper was lying in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady, fast asleep. But the curtain had definitely moved. Sarah had seen it. She checked the other beds. Everyone was sleeping. The ward was completely still now. Sarah returned to her desk, uneasy. Something was wrong. She could feel it, but she couldn't identify what. The morgue attendant arrived 15 minutes later. A tired-looking older man named Henry. He'd been working at the hospital since it opened, had probably moved hundreds of bodies. Ward 7? He asked. Bed 3, Sarah said. Private Anderson. Henry nodded, went to collect the body. Sarah stayed at her desk. She didn't like watching bodies being removed. It felt disrespectful somehow. Henry loaded the gurney, started wheeling it toward the door. Then he stopped, turned to Sarah. Miss Mitchell, do you ever hear things? At night? Sarah looked at him. What kind of things? Voices, whispers, like someone calling names. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Why do you ask? Henry shook his head. No reason. Just this hospital. At night. Sometimes I hear things I can't explain. That's all. He left with the body. Sarah was alone with 7 sleeping patients. She tried to return to her charting, but Henry's words bothered her. Someone calling names. That's exactly what she'd heard earlier. Her own name, whispered. The rest of the night passed uneventfully. No more whispers, no more moving curtains. Just quiet. At 0800 hours, the morning nurse arrived. Sarah gave report, mentioned that Private Anderson had died. Didn't mention the whispers or the curtains. It seemed silly in the daylight. Sarah went home, slept. Came back that evening for her next shift, November 13th, her second night that week. The shift started normally. 8 patients again. A new soldier had been admitted to bed 3, the bed where Private Anderson had died. A young private named Williams, shrapnel wounds, not serious, he'd recover. Sarah did her rounds, everything normal, everyone sleeping. Then at 0140 hours, 1:40 a.m., she heard it again. A whisper, clear this time, coming from the middle of the ward. Not her name this time, a different name. Anderson. Sarah stood up, looked at the beds. Nobody was moving. Everyone appeared to be sleeping. But someone had definitely whispered that name. Anderson, the soldier who died the night before. Sarah walked down the aisle. Is someone awake? She called softly. No response. Then she heard it again. Louder this time. Multiple voices, whispering the same name in unison. Anderson. 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 Sarah's heart was racing. The whispers were coming from multiple beds. But when she looked at the patients, they were all lying still. Eyes closed, not moving. Who's talking? She demanded, her voice sharper now. The whispers stopped. Sudden silence. So complete it felt oppressive. Sarah walked to bed 5. Private Martinez, post-surgical patient, recovering from appendectomy. Young kid, maybe 19. He'd been chatty during the day, homesick, talked about his family in Texas. She looked at him. His eyes were closed, but his lips were moving, just slightly, like he was whispering something. Sarah leaned closer, listened. Anderson, Martinez was whispering, over and over. Anderson, Anderson. But his eyes were still closed. He appeared to be completely asleep. Sarah gently shook his shoulder. Private Martinez? His eyes opened, slowly, confused. Ma'am, were you just talking? No, ma'am, I was sleeping. You didn't say anything? Didn't whisper? Martinez looked genuinely confused. No, ma'am, I don't think so. Did I? Sarah studied his face. He wasn't lying. He genuinely didn't remember speaking. It's fine, she said. Go back to sleep. Martinez closed his eyes. Within seconds, his breathing steadied. Asleep again. Sarah checked the other beds. Everyone was sleeping. Nobody else seemed to be talking. She returned to her desk, tried to make sense of it. Martinez had been whispering Anderson's name in his sleep. Anderson, the soldier who died in this ward less than 24 hours ago. Coincidence? Maybe. People talk in their sleep. Maybe Martinez had heard Anderson's name during report or something, but the whispers had come from multiple beds. She was certain of that. Sarah spent the rest of the night on edge, watching the beds, listening for whispers. But nothing else happened. The ward stayed quiet until morning. She didn't report the incident, didn't mention it to the morning nurse. What would she say? Some patients were talking in their sleep? It sounded ridiculous. But that night, November 14th, it happened again. Different patient this time. Bed 9, Private Johnson. Leg amputation. He'd been heavily sedated all day. Should have been unconscious. But at 01:53 hours, Sarah heard him whisper, Anderson. She went to his bed. Johnson's eyes were closed, deeply asleep, but his lips were moving, whispering that name over and over. Then bed 4 joined in, Private Lewis. Then bed 7, Private Taylor. Within minutes, 5 patients were whispering the same name in their sleep, all in unison, like a chorus. Anderson, Anderson, Anderson. Sarah stood in the center of the ward, watching this impossible thing happen. 5 men, all deeply asleep, all whispering the same name at the same time. She checked each one, tried to wake them. But they wouldn't wake up. They just kept whispering. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. All 5 men went silent at the exact same moment. Sarah stood there in the darkness, her heart pounding. This wasn't normal. This wasn't sleep talking. This was something else. She checked her watch. 0200 hours exactly. 2 a.m. The ward was silent again. The patients returned to normal breathing, no more whispers. Sarah documented the incident in her notes. Multiple patients vocalized during sleep, all calm now. She didn't mention that they'd all said the same name, that they'd spoken in unison. She didn't know how to explain that. The next morning, she asked the day shift nurse if any of the patients had mentioned Anderson. Maybe they'd known him. Maybe they'd been in the same unit. Anderson? The nurse said. No, I don't think any of these patients knew him. Why? Just curious, Sarah said. But she wasn't just curious. She was scared. Because if none of these patients had known Anderson, how did they know his name? November 15th. Sarah's 4th consecutive night shift. She arrived at the ward early. Wanted to talk to the evening nurse before she left. Wanted to know if anything unusual had happened during the day. Unusual? Nurse Thompson asked. Like what? I don't know. Patients acting strange? Talking about soldiers who died? Thompson gave her an odd look. No. Why? What's going on at night? Sarah hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing. Just checking. Thompson left. Sarah was alone with her patients again. 8 soldiers, all sleeping peacefully. Everything looked normal. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Something was building. She could sense it. Her first round was uneventful. All patients stable, no complaints. She settled at her desk to do her charting. At 01:45 hours, bed 6's patient, Private Reynolds, started having trouble breathing. Sarah rushed over. Reynolds was a gas case like Anderson had been. Lungs damaged. He'd been stable all week, but now he was struggling, gasping, his lips turning blue. Sarah tried everything. Oxygen, repositioning, but it wasn't helping. Reynolds was drowning in his own fluids. She called for the doctor, but she knew it was too late. Reynolds died at 0209 hours. 2:09 a.m. Sarah recorded the time, pulled the sheet over his face, called the morgue. While she was on the phone, she heard it, the whispers, starting again. She turned around. 4 patients, beds 3, 5, 7, and 9, were all whispering the same word. Not Anderson this time. A new name. Reynolds. They were whispering the name of the man who just died, the man whose body was still in the room. Sarah dropped the phone, walked toward the beds. All 4 patients were deeply asleep, eyes closed, not moving. But their lips were moving, whispering, Reynolds, Reynolds, Reynolds. Stop it, Sarah said, her voice shaking. Wake up, stop it. But they didn't stop. They kept whispering, all in perfect unison. Then bed 2 joined in, then bed 8. 6 patients now, all whispering the same name. Sarah backed away, toward the door. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. The whispers grew louder. Not loud enough to be yelling, but louder than whispers should be, like multiple voices layered on top of each other. Reynolds, Reynolds, Reynolds. Then they changed. The whispers shifted, became 2 names. Anderson, Reynolds, Anderson, Reynolds. The names of the 2 men who died in this ward. Sarah's hands were shaking. She wanted to run, wanted to leave the ward, but she couldn't. These were her patients. She was responsible for them. She forced herself to approach bed 3. Private Williams, the new patient who'd taken Anderson's bed. Williams's eyes were closed, but he was whispering both names. Anderson, Reynolds. Anderson, Reynolds. Sarah shook him, hard. Private Williams, wake up! His eyes opened, immediately, focused, alert, like he'd been awake the whole time. "Ma'am," he said, his voice normal, not whispering. "Were you just talking?" Williams looked confused. "No, ma'am, I was sleeping." "You were whispering. Names, Anderson and Reynolds." Williams's face went pale. I don't know those names, ma'am. You were whispering them, just now." "I swear I wasn't. I was asleep. I don't remember." He stopped, his eyes widened. "Wait. I had a dream. There were men standing around my bed, looking down at me. I couldn't see their faces, but they were saying names, over and over, making me repeat them." Sarah felt cold. "What men?" "I don't know. Soldiers, maybe? They were wearing uniforms, but I couldn't see their faces, just shapes." Williams was shaking now. "It was just a dream, right? Just a nightmare?" Sarah didn't answer, because she didn't know. Henry, the morgue attendant, arrived at 02:30 hours to collect Reynolds's body. Sarah was waiting at the nurse's station. She needed to talk to him, needed to know if he'd experienced anything like this before. "Henry," she said as he entered, "can I ask you something?" He looked at her, tired eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. "About the voices?" Sarah nodded. Henry sighed, sat down in one of the chairs. "How long have you been working night shift in Ward 7? 4 nights now. Have they started whispering names yet?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "You know about this? I've worked here since the hospital opened, moved hundreds of bodies. And Ward 7, he paused. "Ward 7 is different." "Different how?" "It started about a month ago, after we started getting the gas casualties. Men dying slow, painful deaths. Something changed in this ward. The night nurses started reporting strange things. Whispers, curtains moving, patients talking in their sleep, all saying the same names." "Names of soldiers who died here?" Henry nodded. "Every soldier who dies in Ward 7, his name gets added to the list. The next night, patients start whispering it. Patients who never knew the dead man. Patients who were unconscious when he died. But somehow, they know." "How is that possible?" "I don't know. But it's real. I've heard it myself. When I come to collect bodies at night, I hear them. Multiple voices, all whispering the same names." "Has anyone reported this? To the doctors? The hospital administrator?" 2 nurses tried. They were told they were overtired, that they were experiencing stress from the war. One got reassigned to day shift. The other quit. "So nobody's investigating this?" Henry shook his head. "The hospital administration doesn't want to acknowledge it. Bad for morale. Bad for the hospital's reputation. So they ignore it." "How many names are there now?" Henry was quiet for a moment. "Including Anderson and Reynolds, 14. 14 soldiers had died in this ward. 14 names being whispered by sleeping patients every night." "Does it get worse?" Sarah asked. "Or does it stay like this?" Henry looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes. Fear. Real fear. "It gets worse," he said quietly. "The more names they have, the stronger it gets." "Stronger? What does that mean?" "Last week, all 12 beds started whispering at once. Not just a few patients. All of them. For 10 minutes straight. 14 names. Over and over. The night nurse, Nurse Peterson, she said it felt like the room was vibrating, like the walls were shaking." "Where's Nurse Peterson now?" She requested immediate transfer, left the hospital entirely, said she'd rather quit nursing than work another night in Ward 7. Sarah felt sick. Why didn't anyone warn me? Would you have believed them before you experienced it yourself? He was right. She wouldn't have believed it. Nobody would. Henry stood up. My advice? Request a transfer. Get out of Ward 7. Work a different ward, different shift. Anywhere else. And if I don't? Henry looked at the beds, at the sleeping soldiers. Then be careful. Very careful. Because whatever's happening here, it's not finished yet. He collected Reynolds's body and left. Sarah sat at her desk, alone with 7 sleeping patients, and 2 empty beds where Anderson and Reynolds had died. She checked her watch. 03:15 hours. Almost 5 hours left on her shift. She didn't think she'd make it. The rest of that night passed without incident. No more whispers, no movement, just silence. But Sarah couldn't sleep when she got home. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard those voices. Anderson, Reynolds, over and over. She considered requesting a transfer. Henry was right. Getting out of Ward 7 was the smart thing to do. But something stopped her. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness. She was a good nurse. She wasn't going to let, whatever this was, chase her away. November 16th, her 5th night. 2 new patients had been admitted during the day. Beds 3 and 6, the beds where Anderson and Reynolds had died, now held new soldiers. Neither was critical. Both would probably recover. Sarah did her evening rounds. Everyone stable. Everyone comfortable. She settled at her desk. Waited. The whispers started at 0200 hours. 2 a.m. Like clockwork. But this time, it was different. This time, all 9 patients started whispering simultaneously. Not gradually. Not one at a time. All at once. In perfect unison. And they weren't just whispering 2 names anymore. They were whispering all 14 names. Every soldier who died in Ward 7 over the past month. Anderson, Reynolds, Miller, Jackson, Thompson, White, Davis, Martinez, Wilson, Taylor, Brown, Johnson, Clark, Williams. 14 names, spoken by 9 voices, over and over, like a prayer, like a chant. Sarah stood up, walked down the center aisle, looked at each patient. All of them were asleep, eyes closed, not moving. But their mouths were moving in perfect synchronization, speaking words they shouldn't know. The sound was wrong. 9 voices shouldn't sound like that. It should have been messy, overlapping, out of sync. But it wasn't. It was perfectly coordinated. Like one voice coming from 9 mouths. Sarah felt the temperature drop. The ward was suddenly cold. She could see her breath. The whispers continued. 14 names. Over and over. Getting louder. Then something else happened. The empty beds, beds 3 and 6, where the new patients slept. The sheets started moving. Not dramatically, just subtle movements. Like someone was lying in the bed, breathing, shifting position. But Sarah could see the patients. They weren't moving. They were lying perfectly still, whispering those names. The sheet movements were coming from underneath, like someone invisible was lying there, in the same beds where Anderson and Reynolds had died. Sarah backed toward the door. She'd seen enough. This was beyond her ability to handle, but before she could leave, the patients' voices changed. They stopped whispering the 14 names, started whispering something new, something that made Sarah's blood freeze. They were whispering her name. Sarah. Sarah, 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 9 voices, all saying her name, in perfect unison. Sarah ran, out of the ward, down the hallway, to the nurse's break room, slammed the door behind her. She was shaking, crying. She'd never been so terrified in her life. Another nurse found her 10 minutes later. "Sarah, what happened? Are you okay?" Sarah couldn't explain, couldn't find the words. She just sat there, shaking. The other nurse checked Ward 7, came back 5 minutes later. "Everyone's sleeping," she said. "Everything looks fine. Are you sure you're okay?" Sarah wasn't okay, but she nodded anyway. She finished her shift. Somehow. Avoided Ward 7 for the rest of the night. Let the other nurse cover it. When morning came, Sarah went straight to the nursing supervisor's office. "I need to request a transfer," she said. "Out of Ward 7, immediately." The supervisor looked at her. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's something wrong with that ward." "Wrong how?" Sarah hesitated. How could she explain? "The patients, they talk in their sleep. All at once, say things they shouldn't know." The supervisor's expression didn't change. "Nurse Mitchell, you've been working 6 nights in a row. You're overtired. What you're experiencing is stress. Combat fatigue. It's common among medical staff. This isn't stress. There's something actually wrong. I'm going to recommend you take 3 days off. Rest. When you come back, we'll reevaluate." "I don't want to come back to Ward 7. We'll discuss it after your rest period." The meeting was over. Sarah had been dismissed. Sarah took the 3 days off, tried to rest, tried to forget what she'd experienced in Ward 7. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. The whispers, the synchronized voices, her name being called by sleeping men. She considered quitting, finding work at a different hospital, or leaving nursing entirely. The war was almost over anyway. She could go home. But on her second day off, something happened that changed everything. She was shopping in the nearby town when she ran into another nurse, a woman named Claire who'd worked at the hospital a month earlier. "Sarah," Claire said, "how are you? Are you still at Hospital 47? "Yes, I'm working nights in Ward 7. Claire's face changed. The smile vanished. "Ward 7? They put you in Ward 7? You know about it?" "Know about it? I worked there for 2 weeks. Worst 2 weeks of my life." Claire looked around, making sure nobody was listening. "Did they tell you about the whispers?" "No, I had to figure it out myself." "Of course they didn't. They never tell anyone. They just keep assigning nurses to that ward and hoping nobody notices." "What did you experience?" Claire's hands were shaking. "The same thing you probably experienced. Patients whispering names, all at once. Names of soldiers who'd died. But it got worse for me." "Worse how?" "On my last night I stayed late, past my shift, because one of the patients was critical, and I wanted to make sure he was stable. It was maybe 9 a.m. daylight, and the whispers started. During the day, that had never happened before. Sarah felt cold. "What did you do?" "I ran, got out of there, told my supervisor I was quitting. She tried to convince me to stay, said I was just stressed. But I knew better. I knew that ward was wrong." "Did you ever figure out why? What's causing it?" Claire shook her head. "I did some research, asked some local people. Apparently that building, the building where Hospital 47 is located, it used to be something else before the war." "What was it?" "A monastery. Old one, hundreds of years old. The monks used to care for the sick there, people with incurable diseases. They'd bring them to die in peace." So hundreds of people died in that building over the centuries, maybe thousands. And the room that's now Ward 7, that was the monastery's infirmary, where the sickest patients were kept. Sarah felt her stomach turn. You think, what? That the place is haunted? I don't know what I think. But that ward has seen more death than any other room in the hospital. And something about that, something about all those deaths in one place, it changed something. The military must know about this. Why haven't they closed Ward 7? Because officially, nothing's wrong. All the deaths are explainable. War casualties, gas victims, normal battlefield injuries. And the whispers? The hospital administration says that's just nurses being overtired. They won't acknowledge anything supernatural. But it is supernatural. What else could it be? I don't know. But Sarah, my advice, don't go back. Request permanent transfer, or quit, because Ward 7 is dangerous, and I don't think it's finished yet. Sarah went home that night more confused than ever. Part of her wanted to quit, to run like Claire had, to never set foot in that ward again. But another part of her, the part that made her a good nurse, couldn't abandon her patients. Those soldiers didn't ask to be assigned to Ward 7. They were just wounded men trying to recover. Someone had to take care of them. Someone had to work that shift. On November 20th, Sarah returned to work. She went straight to the nursing supervisor. I've had my rest, she said. I'm ready to return to work. But I'm requesting permanent assignment to a different ward. The supervisor looked at her. I'm afraid that's not possible. We're short-staffed. Ward 7 needs an experienced night nurse. You're the most qualified person we have. I can't work that ward anymore. Then I'll have to note in your file that you're refusing assignment. That could affect your future employment prospects. Sarah understood the threat. Refuse and be labeled difficult, unreliable. She'd never work as a nurse again. Fine, she said. I'll work Ward 7, but I'm documenting everything that happens. Every incident, every whisper, everything. You're free to document whatever you like, the supervisor said. But I doubt anyone will believe you. Sarah returned to Ward 7 that night, November 20th, ready for whatever was coming. She had no idea how bad it would get. November 20th, Sarah's first night back in Ward 7. 10 patients tonight. All the beds were full except 2. The ward was quieter than usual. Most patients sedated, resting peacefully. Sarah did her rounds. Everything normal. She settled at her desk, waited for 0200 hours. The whispers started exactly on time. All 10 patients began simultaneously. But tonight was different. Tonight they weren't just whispering names. They were whispering sentences, full sentences, in English, clear and coherent. We're still here. We're waiting. We're not leaving. 10 voices, speaking in perfect unison, all saying the same words. Sarah stood up, walked toward the beds. Who's speaking? Where are you? The patients didn't respond to her voice. They just kept speaking. We're still here. We're waiting. We're not leaving. Sarah checked bed 5. Private Morrison, a young soldier, barely 18. He'd been unconscious for days. Medically induced coma. There was no way he could be speaking coherently. But his lips were moving, forming those words. We're still here. This was impossible. A comatose patient couldn't speak. His brain wasn't functioning at a conscious level. But he was speaking. They all were. Then the whispers changed again, became more specific, more personal. Sarah, we see you. We know you. You can't leave us. Her name again. But this time, it felt different. Not threatening. More like pleading. You have to help us. You have to remember us. We're not ready to be forgotten. Sarah's heart was racing. Who are you? What do you want? The whispers stopped. Sudden silence. All 10 patients went quiet at exactly the same moment. Sarah stood in the center of the ward, alone, surrounded by sleeping men, waiting for something to happen. Then she felt it. A presence, like someone was standing behind her. She turned around. Nobody there. Just the empty beds at the far end of the ward. But she could feel it. Something was there. Something invisible, watching her. The temperature dropped. Her breath became visible. The ward was freezing now, colder than any night before. One of the patients started shivering, then another. Soon all 10 patients were trembling in their sleep, like the cold was affecting them even unconscious. Sarah grabbed blankets, started covering the patients, trying to keep them warm. But the cold was unnatural. No amount of blankets would help. Then the bed started shaking, not violently, just subtle vibrations, like someone was pushing them, testing them. Sarah backed toward the door. This was beyond anything she'd experienced before. The ward was becoming physically dangerous. She needed to evacuate the patients, get them out of this room. But where would she take them? And how would she explain? Before she could make a decision, the lights went out. Complete darkness. The emergency lights should have kicked on immediately, but they didn't. The ward was pitch black. Sarah heard breathing, heavy breathing, coming from all directions. But her patients didn't breathe like that. This was different, deeper, older. She fumbled for her flashlight, found it, turned it on. The beam illuminated the ward. And Sarah saw something that made her scream. The empty beds, beds 3 and 6, weren't empty anymore. There were shapes in them, dark shapes, human-shaped but wrong. Too still, too rigid. Sarah pointed the flashlight directly at bed 3. The shape was wearing a military uniform. But the face, there was no face, just darkness where a face should be. The shape sat up, slowly, deliberately, turned towards Sarah. She ran, out of the ward, down the hallway, screaming for help. 2 orderlies found her, tried to calm her down, asked what happened. "There's something in Ward 7, she gasped. "Something in the beds. We need to evacuate the patients, now." They went to check, came back 5 minutes later. "Ma'am, there's nothing there, just patients, all sleeping. Everything looks normal." "No, I saw something, in the empty beds, shapes, figures." "Miss Mitchell, maybe you should sit down. You look pale." They thought she was hysterical, seeing things, just like the supervisor had said. But Sarah knew what she'd seen, and she knew she couldn't work that ward anymore. November 21st, Sarah's final night in Ward 7. Though she didn't know it yet, she'd been ordered by the nursing supervisor to complete one more shift. After that, they'd discuss reassignment. Sarah agreed. One more night. Then she was done with this ward forever. 10 patients, all sleeping when she arrived. She did her rounds quickly, didn't want to spend more time in that room than necessary. She settled at her desk, checked her watch. 0:30 hours. 30 minutes past midnight. 90 minutes until the whispers usually started. But tonight, they started early. At 0100 hours, all 10 patients began whispering simultaneously. But they weren't whispering names or sentences. They were whispering numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Counting, over and over, in perfect unison. Sarah stood up, watched them, trying to understand what this meant. The counting continued, getting faster, more urgent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then bed 4's patient, Private Chen. His voice changed, became deeper, older, not his voice at all. 11, 12, 13, 14. The 14 names, the 14 soldiers who died in this ward. Then bed 7 joined in, with a different voice. 15, 16, 17. Were they counting, predicting, claiming? Sarah felt panic rising. Were they saying 17 soldiers would die? 17 names would be whispered? The counting stopped at 20. 20. All 10 patients said it simultaneously, then fell silent. Sarah checked her watch. 01:15 hours. The whispers had lasted only 15 minutes, much shorter than previous nights. But somehow that felt worse, like something was conserving energy, preparing. The ward was silent for the next 30 minutes. Sarah sat at her desk, unable to focus, watching the beds, waiting. At 01:45 hours, bed 9's patient started having trouble breathing. Private Wallace. A gas case. Lungs failing. Sarah rushed over, tried to help, but she recognized the pattern. She'd seen it before with Anderson, with Reynolds. Wallace was dying, and there was nothing she could do. He died at 01:58 hours. Sarah recorded the time, called the morgue, started the familiar routine. While she was documenting the death, the whispers started again. All 9 remaining patients, speaking in unison. Wallace. 15 names now, 15 soldiers remembered. They were counting the dead, creating a roster, a list of men who died in this ward. Sarah finished her paperwork. Henry arrived to collect Wallace's body. 15 now, he said quietly as he loaded the gurney. You've been counting too? Hard not to. Happens every few nights. Another soldier dies. Another name gets added. How many more? Sarah asked. How many before it stops? Henry shook his head. I don't think it stops. I think it just keeps going, forever. Every soldier who dies here becomes part of it, part of whatever this is. That's why you told me to leave. That's why I told you to leave. Henry took Wallace's body. Sarah was alone with 9 sleeping patients. She checked her watch. 02:30 hours. 5.5 hours left on her shift. She didn't think she'd last that long. At 0300 hours, the beds started moving. All of them. Slowly rolling away from the walls, moving toward the center of the ward. Sarah watched in horror as the beds arranged themselves, forming a circle, all facing inward, all facing her. The patients remained asleep, unaware they were moving, but the beds kept rolling, positioning themselves. When the circle was complete, the whispers started again. Louder this time. Not just whispers anymore, actual voices. Sarah Mitchell, nurse, witness, remember us. Tell them we were here. Tell them we mattered. The voices were different now. Individual voices, not synchronized. Each patient speaking in a different voice. Older voices. Voices that shouldn't belong to these young soldiers. I was Private Anderson, 22 years old. I died here. I was Private Reynolds, 25. Gas took me. I was Private Miller, 19. Never made it home. One by one, the patients spoke, each claiming to be a different dead soldier, each giving their name, their age, how they died. 15 voices from 9 mouths. The mathematics didn't work, but it was happening. Sarah stood in the center of the circle, tears streaming down her face. "I remember you. I promise I remember you." The voices fell silent. The bed stopped moving. Everything went still. Then one final whisper, from all 9 patients simultaneously. "Thank you." The beds rolled back to their original positions. The patients fell into deep sleep. The ward returned to normal. Sarah resigned that morning, told the supervisor she was done. Not just with Ward 7, with the hospital entirely. They didn't try to stop her. Sarah Mitchell left Hospital 47 on November 22, 1918. She never worked as a military nurse again. She went home to America, got married, had children, lived a normal life. But she never forgot Ward 7. For 49 years, she didn't talk about it, didn't tell anyone what she'd experienced. Who would have believed her? But in 1967, as she lay dying in her own hospital bed, she told her daughter everything. The whispers, the names, the voices of dead soldiers speaking through sleeping men. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" her daughter asked. "Because I couldn't explain it," Sarah said. "Still can't. I don't know if that ward was haunted, or if something about the trauma, all those men dying in one place, if that created something, some kind of energy, some kind of collective consciousness. Do you think the soldiers were really there? Their spirits? I think they wanted to be remembered. That's all. They died so far from home, so young, and they were afraid of being forgotten. So they found a way to make sure at least one person remembered them. And you did remember them. You just told me their names. I remember all 15. Anderson, Reynolds, Miller, Jackson, Thompson, White, Davis, Martinez, Wilson, Taylor, Brown, Johnson, Clark, Williams, Wallace. I've remembered them every day for 49 years. Sarah died 3 days later. Her daughter kept the story private for decades, didn't share it, didn't write it down. It seemed too impossible, too strange. But in 1995, she was contacted by a historian researching World War I military hospitals. The historian was specifically interested in Hospital 47 in France. Had Sarah's mother worked there? The daughter confirmed it, said her mother had been a nurse there. Ward 7 specifically. The historian went quiet on the phone. Then, "Ward 7, did she ever mention anything unusual?" "Why do you ask?" "Because I've interviewed 3 other nurses who worked Ward 7. They all reported the same thing. Whispers at night, patients speaking in unison, names of dead soldiers. All of them left the ward claiming it was haunted." The daughter felt chills. "My mother told me the same story. I thought maybe she'd been traumatized, that she'd imagined it. She didn't imagine it. Something happened in that ward. Multiple witnesses across multiple months, all reporting identical experiences. That's not trauma. That's evidence." The historian asked if Sarah had documented anything, written down names or dates or specific incidents. The daughter found her mother's old nursing journal, hidden in a box in the attic, 50 years old. Pages yellowed, but the entries were clear, detailed. Professional documentation of every incident. The historian published a paper in 1997, Unexplained Phenomena in Military Hospital 47, a historical analysis. The paper included Sarah's testimony along with testimonies from 6 other nurses who'd worked Ward 7. All reported the same experiences. The whispers, the names, the voices, the beds moving. All identical details across multiple witnesses who'd never met each other. The paper received mixed reactions. Some historians dismissed it as wartime stress. Others found it compelling evidence of genuine paranormal activity. The hospital building still stands in France. It's been converted to apartments now. The room that was Ward 7 is someone's living room. The current residents have reported odd experiences. Whispers at night. Feelings of being watched. One tenant claimed to wake up at exactly 0200 hours every night for a month. No alarm, just suddenly awake. Hearing voices she couldn't quite understand. She moved out after 3 months. Local legend says Ward 7 is still haunted, still counting the dead, still remembering the 15 soldiers, and maybe more, who died there during those final months of the war. Historians have confirmed that 15 soldiers died in Ward 7 between October and November 1918. The names match Sarah's list exactly. Anderson, Reynolds, Miller, Jackson, Thompson, White, Davis, Martinez, Wilson, Taylor, Brown, Johnson, Clark, Williams, Wallace. 15 men, 15 names. All dead before the age of 30. All buried far from home. All remembered by one nurse who promised she'd never forget. Sarah Mitchell kept that promise. And now their story is told. Whether you believe it or not, that's your choice. But if you ever find yourself in an old hospital, on a quiet ward, late at night, and you hear whispers, names you don't recognize, voices speaking in perfect unison, don't dismiss it as imagination. Don't assume you're overtired. Listen. Pay attention. Remember. Because maybe, just maybe, someone is trying to tell you something. Someone who died alone and scared. Someone who doesn't want to be forgotten. And the least we can do, the very least, is remember their names.